All right, so we're going to jump right into Python. If you guys remember from the welcome video, we got you into the introduction of what Python is and getting Python 3.11 installed. If you don't have it installed, make sure you get it installed. I got some questions on, can I use Mac, Linux, Windows? Yeah, you can use whatever you want. That's the reason I use idle as an IDE, is so that it works on every single platform. All right, if you guys want to use your Visual Basic or some of the advanced ones, you can in this class. Just know that when I go to grade your homework, I'm going to be using idle. And again, that's because this is the beginner class. So make sure that it runs in idle. If you guys run a script or code or something else, it's not going to matter in the first couple ones. But as you guys get further in the class, if you're using advanced IDEs, make sure it at least runs in idle like it's supposed to. All right. We're going to jump right into it because we got quite a bit to cover. So for Python basics, as far as this class and how it works, if you guys go out and read the material or at least skim through the material so you know what we're talking about in the classroom, it's going to go a whole lot easier. I'm not going to read this line for line, word for word, right? I'm going to pull out the key pieces you need to know out of each one of these sections. So it's to your benefit if you go through and actually read this material if you don't quite understand it, all right? Then you can go back and rehash some of the videos and kind of go through there. So over here on the right-hand side, you can see I have idle. This idle shell that I have here is known as the interactive shell, meaning I type something in and hit enter, and it is going to go ahead and execute that particular line of code. All right. This is also what's called a REPL. So that's a read, evaluate, print, and loop. In this case, it's going to read the stuff I typed in, evaluate whatever it is. So evaluate means perform the operation. So in this case, you may see something like 2 + 2, and then it's going to evaluate down to 4. All right. And then it's going to end up printing that result back to me. Most of what you guys are going to be doing and working with this is not going to be interacting with this shell. So I'm going to skip over that. You can do this if you want to test some code and things like that. It works great, but I highly recommend you just jump right into the script portion so that you know how to write scripts for the class. All right. As I mentioned before, this here, 2 + 2, is known as it's an expression, and we're going to do some kind of operation on it. So we're going to take 2. 2 is a value, and then the plus sign is a math operator, and then we're going to add, in this case, 2, and then it's going to evaluate down to 4. So every time we type something in, it's always going to evaluate down to something when we're doing the math operators and such. So there is a series of math operators. Most of you know this from probably high school. You got the order of precedence. You may remember it as PEMDAS, that kind of thing. The idea is that it goes from the highest precedence to the lowest precedence. So the highest precedence is going to be exponents, working its way down to multiplication, division, subtraction, etc. All right. It's also known as the order operations. You guys might, there's like 3 different names for the same exact thing. All right. And it works the same way when you did PEMDAS, PEMDAS being the parentheses. So if it's in parentheses, it's going to execute that code first. Then it's going to go ahead and do that. So if you see, for example, 2 + 3 × 6, it's going to execute 2 + 3 first is 5, and 5 × 6 is what? 30. Yeah, right. So it's not going to do that, right? It's going to do it in order of operations, which means it's going to do what? It's going to do 3 × 6 first, giving you 18, then adding 2 to that, giving you 20. Okay. So it's going to execute in the highest precedence as it comes down. And you can see this chart as it moves its way down. All right. So for all those that get all those little Facebook messages and wanting to know what the final answer is, you guys should hopefully know how to do that by order of precedence. All right. When you come down here, if I put parentheses over 2 + 3, well, now that's going to evaluate first. So that's going to be 5. And now we have 5 × 6 and we get 30. Okay. Same way on down, as you add them out, you're going to get the evaluations as it goes down. And if you have a long, complicated one like this, again, the inner parentheses is going to get executed first. You do that. Then you go outside and do the outside ones and you get them all the way down. Okay. Again, this is kind of a review of math. We're not going to cover a ton of math in here. All right. It's just so you know how things are going to operate and move their way down. All right. The way Python executes is very similar to like grammar, right? Meaning that this is a grammatically correct sentence, right? This grammatically is sentence not correct A, right? What does that mean? It just means most of the way you parse of your Python thing is just like you would parse it in grammar in English. So if you write it out, it's going to execute it like you would expect to do. So Python is known for being very human readable. In other words, if you read code, it kind of makes sense. Like it follows what you would think of in a grammatical sense. All right. If you have a syntax error, you're missing something, you're going to get errors that pop up like over here, right? So if I say 2 plus, it's going to come back and give me a syntax error, then I'm missing something else, right? I should have something after the plus sign as it goes through there. When you guys do this with your scripts, which we'll go through, it's going to tell you what line you have the issue on. Now, it's not always going to be that line, right? Because if you're missing something on the line before, it's tacking that onto the line below it, but it says the error's on this line. So sometimes you have to look up a line or maybe 2 lines to see where the error actually lies. But when it's executing, says line 12, it's when it goes to execute that is where the issue is. And a lot of times it's going to be things like commas, periods. A lot of times you're just going to be forgetting a parenthesis around something. All right. In Python, we have 3 main data types. There's actually going to be a ton of them that you're going to learn throughout the course, but there's 3 core ones that go through there. You have integers. These are considered your whole numbers. So -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Those are going to be your integers. Those are represented by int. So if for short inside Python, we represent those as int. A floating point number is going to have anything that has a decimal point in it. So -1, 2.5, -1.0. -1.0 is not the same as -1. All right. You have a floating point and you have an integer. They're 2 totally different things as they go through there. And then finally, we have strings. And so strings are usually denoted by having a single quote around them. So you can have a single quote with an A, 2 double A's. Even if I put the number 11 in single quotes, it's a string at that point. Strings are going to be the most universal. We can convert things later on. We're going to talk about how to convert between integers and strings and floating points, etc. But strings are considered the most universal data type through there. Hint, hint, wink, wink. That may or may not be on a quiz coming up. All right. Strings are the most universal data type. All right. So as we work with our strings in Python, they're going to reference that as str, is just the abbreviation of what you do with strings, and we'll work with those. You can have an empty string or a blank string that is denoted by 2 single quotes as we go through there. So if we look at this code down here, if I get a syntax error, EOL, while scanning literal or string literal, that means end of line while scanning that. It means you're missing that single quote. So if you see this error pop up in your code, it's trying to tell you that you're probably missing a single quote around your string. All right. Before we go too much further than that, you can use double quotes. Now, the book is going to talk about that later on. I like to introduce it right away. The reason you would want to use double quotes is if you have contractions inside of your text. So say I'm putting out and I say, this is her program, or that is Jason's software that goes through there, right? You have an apostrophe S. Well, if I do an apostrophe S, so if I say something like print, this is Jason's, hold on. This is Jason's program, right? And I want it to print this. You'll notice that as I'm typing this, it goes from green to black. And the reason is my apostrophe is actually interpreted as the end of this string. And therefore, if I execute this, I'm going to end up with some kind of error on that line. All right. So to me, it's always better if you wrap in double quotes, because then I can say this is Jason's program. And notice how everything stays green. And then you can go ahead and hit enter, and it will go ahead and print that out to the user. All right. So whether you use single quotes, double quotes, it does not matter. Just know that the benefit of double quotes is that if you have single quotes in it, it's not going to cause a problem. As you see me live coding up here throughout all the videos, I'm going to do a mixture of both, right? My hands just do it over time. So don't think that you have to use one or the other. You can use either one. Double quotes is just going to get you out of any bind of accidentally having 2 single quotes inside of a actual string. All right. Anybody got any questions on that? Anybody got any questions over the 3 main data types? Okay. So the next couple concepts we're going to talk about is string concatenation. String concatenation is basically the way of adding and I'm doing air quotes for those of you that can't see me in class, adding two strings together. All right. So I have a string of Alice, for example, and I want to add it to the string Bob, meaning I want to put those two together. That's what concatenation is. I would use Alice in a single quote plus Bob in single quotes, and it will put it together and make it look like this, Alice Bob. Notice there's no space in between there. There's nothing else. So if you want a space when you do that, you have to add one of those in. So if I say this, for example, this string, let's do this plus, and then we throw a space in there, plus space is a sentence, right? Now hit enter, it's going to match that. And does anybody see why it doesn't match correctly there? Well, one, I shouldn't have put the closing bracket there. This is why I don't use the REPL for this. But you could put those two together there, and you're going to see that it added it in there correctly. It added a space in between this. If I don't have that space in here, it would look something like this. Right? And notice that it puts the word this and is together. And it's going to do that as it goes through there. So as you guys are building out strings so that you can print something out to the user, you want to make sure that they're formatted correctly. And if you're trying to add a couple different pieces of strings along the way, you can use string concatenation for that. All right. String replication is similar, except string replication allows us to create multiple instances of the same string. So say I have the word the, and I want 50 of those. I use a multiplication sign and hit 50 and hit enter. And I get this long string with 50 does inside of it. All right. It's not extremely useful, but there are places this could be useful. For example, if in your programs you want to build a header or a banner at the top of your program, right? Well, instead of me having to figure out a banner that has, 50 of these pound signs, and I can print that out, or I could do the pound sign times 30 or 40 or whatever. So pound sign times 40, and I would automatically get that going across. All right. It's a shortcut way of repeating everything that you just typed in. Does everybody see how that works? All right. You cannot concatenate strings and integers together. You can only concatenate strings to strings, and you can only add integers with integers. Does that make sense? You can actually add integers and floats too, but yeah, the result would be a float. All right. If you try to concatenate something you're not supposed to, if I say something like Alice plus 42, it's going to come back and give me an error, and it's going to say it's a type error that I can only concatenate str, not int to str. All right, what does that mean? It means I can only concatenate strings to strings. I cannot concatenate strings, not integers, to strings. Does that make sense? So it's going to abbreviate string as str, integer as int. It's a type error. It means you try to concatenate things that aren't there, which means you may have to convert those two together. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. All right. Anybody got any questions on string concatenation and string replication? Yes.
How do you do space?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, sorry, that's tiny over there. See if I can blow that up here real quick. So if you want to have a space in between there, throw this up here. You would do something like this plus, and then your single quote with a space in there. That plus is a sentence, right? And you can see it added the space right here for us. In this case, I already had spaces over. If I didn't have that, and I just do this, but I take out that space in there, notice that it mashes those two together. All right. It's literally just the space bar between two quotes. And that way, that's the only thing in that string is just a white space character at that point. All right. If you need to start with an empty string, then you just put two quotes together and it starts as an empty string. The difference between this and some other languages that you may use out there, like C and JavaScript and some of the others, you do not have to define what type of variable this is off the flat. Does that make sense? So if you're coming from other languages, you may have to say this is going to be an integer variable. This is going to have to be a Boolean variable, that kind of thing. You do not do that in Python. It's denoted by how you write the syntax inside of here. All right. So speaking of variables, as we go through there, variables are going to be the main thing that you're going to use in Python. They are like storage boxes, okay? Just like the box describes here. The idea behind that is we want to store something in this variable, and we're going to reference that variable, and it's equivalent to whatever we stored it as, all right? So we're going to use an assignment operator. Assignment operator is just an equal sign, okay? So if I have a variable called name, and I say that's equal to Jason, I got to put Jason in single quotes as a string, and I hit enter, notice nothing comes back to me. But if I want to say, what is the variable name? Hit enter, it comes back as Jason. Now I can change that variable. I can say something like name equals Sam, hit enter. And now if I ask what name is, it's now Sam. All right. I didn't actually change that variable. I completely overrode the old variable and set a new variable, whatever it is. Everybody understand that? So you can name these whatever you want it to be. It is completely generic. That's a lot of places where people get tripped up in here is they're like, well, what do I have to call my variables? You can name them whatever you want, right? I can name this variable cat, and I can say that's Jason. And if I look at cat, I have Jason. If I say it's blue, but blue is equal to red, now if I reference blue as a variable name in my program, it's actually equal to red, okay? It's whatever you call it, which means you want to give all of your variables meaningful names, right? That is how you keep your sanity when you're programming. Yes?
If you say red, will it say
No, because there is no red. So if I say red, it goes, I don't know what red is, right? Right, you would have to say something like red equals blue, and then it would store it. And it would be red equals, and notice that blue is always in double quotes when I do that. So now red equals blue, and blue equals red. Okay, don't do that. That's good. This is what not to do, right? And that's the reason I'm showing you that, is you want to be meaningful in the names that you pick, all right? But you can concatenate different things together. So if I say my age is equal to 42, which it's not, but it's here, okay? So age is now equal to 42. If I say age plus 50, I'm now going to get 92 as a result. That did not change age. If I type in age, it's still 42. But I'm able to do a math operation on whatever age is plus 50. Does that make sense? Only if it's an integer. Great question. So if I come in here and say my name is Jason, right? And I say name plus 42 or 43, it's going to say I can't do that, right? I have an integer and I have a string. I can't concatenate those two together. And we're really not wanting to do concatenation. We were trying to do math. Or if I say my name is equal to 42, but I put that as a string and I say name plus 42, I can't do that because name itself, although it's the number 42, it's a string. Does everybody see the difference between that? And we can tell it's a string in here because it has the single quotes around it. If I look at age, notice that that 42 does not have the single quotes, which denotes that it is an integer. All right. I sometimes lose people here, so I'm gonna pause. Anybody got any questions?
so why would you put it?
So the reason you would put an integer into a string is when you go to print the variable, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. When you actually want to print that out to the user, you cannot concatenate strings and integers. Therefore, you would have to convert it to a string so that it could actually be concatenated with your print statement. All right. And that's a great, because by the end of today, that's what we're going to do.
Do you wait till it change the shell so it uses double quotes when it prints strings?
The thing is we're hardly ever going to use this shell, right? I mean, here shortly, and that's what I'm going to get out of it, is you're going to be actually writing scripts and not this. So good question. You probably could, but I wouldn't. All right. So variable names. Like I said, you want to make sure you pick good variable names as you go through here. That's the only way you'll keep your sanity while you're trying to write long scripts. All right. In this book and in the context, it's going to use things like spam and eggs and bacon, and that's all from Monty Python, right? You guys are way too young to know what Monty Python is. Anybody? Yeah. All right. Cool. We're good. But you can name these things whatever you want. It's good to keep them meaningful, but there are rules as to what you can do with variable names. So you can have underscores in your variable names, but you cannot have hyphens in a variable name. Okay. You can have camel case, which means it starts with a lower c and then has like the word current balance with a capital B in the middle. That's considered camel case, but you cannot have a space in between two words. All right. You can have letters and then a number, but you cannot begin with a number. You can have an underscore then a number, but you cannot just have a number. So I can't say 42 is equal to 43. All right. You can have all capitals with an underscore, but you cannot have special characters in it like a $sign, @ that kind of stuff. All right. And last but not least, you can have hello is there, but you cannot use single quotes around it. Otherwise, it turns it into a string, right? So don't do that. Now, Python will allow you to set a capital letter like name equals Jason, right? If I finish typing it correctly. All right, so now I have name and name takes it. Do not use capital letters for variable names, okay? Python will accept it and it will execute the code, but later in the semester, that's going to give you issues because capital letters are reserved for classes. That's the reason they want you starting everything over here with lowercase. All right. So yes, you can do it and Python will accept it, but don't do it because it's a bad habit to get into in Python. Always use lowercase letters when you're doing variable names. All right. Anybody got any questions over variables? All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to put all of this together in an actual script. All right, so if you go up here in your shell and you go to File, New, this is what you're going to do every time we're in class. From now on, I will never show the shell on that side. Okay, so we have a script over here. The first thing we want to do is always put our name at the top of the script. If you guys remember, back here in the Blackboard, you come down and you click on the home side. Sorry, I got everything shrink down so it fits on a screen here. Come over here, we go to our homework assignments, and you just copy and paste this one out, put it up top, only make sure you put your name here, okay? Don't put Jason Zeller. You're not Jason Zeller, I'm Jason Zeller, all right? Some people think they got to put the instructor name up there. I know my name, I need to know your name, okay? It seems really simple on this. People forget to do this. Again, as I made on the welcome video, I'm grading almost 80 students this semester. If you don't put your name on your paper, it's no different than high school. Like, I don't know what your name is. Okay. Yep. On Blackboard, let me just blow this up so you can see it like you guys would see it. Under learning modules, and you'll scroll down to assignments, and you can just copy and paste this in every single time. So at the top of every homework assignment, your midterm project, your final project, always copy and paste that at the top. All right. Okay. Again, the first assignment, I'm a little flexible. After that, I start taking off points. I know it sounds harsh, but again, I've got too many to grade. Same way with file names, which we'll go over here in a little bit. All right, let me get back down to the section I was in here real quick. All right. So over here, you copy that in. Notice how everything's red up here. That means it's a comment. So we're adding comments up to this program. Anytime you want to make notes inside of your code, but you don't want Python to execute that code, just put a hashtag in front of it and I can type whatever gibberish I want. Okay. This is good for you to organize your code in this way. So comment your code. Later on, you're actually going to get graded on commenting your code. The idea there is you want to make sure you put as much comments in your code that is necessary for you to understand. Now, you guys are all beginners, right? Comment as much as you possibly can so you remember what you did. Because right now, your program's only going to be about 10 lines of code. When it becomes hundreds of lines of code, you're not going to remember what line 10 did. Okay? So the more comments you're going to do, the better off you are. The worst thing you can do as a programmer in the world is never comment your code. It doesn't make you cool. It just makes everybody suffer around you because they have no idea what your code's doing. And guess what? When 2 years later, you don't know what your code did. All right? As a beginner, I forgot to do a lot of coding, or I forgot to all that too. I forgot to do a lot of commenting. But that didn't do me much good because about a year later, when things started breaking, I got to go fix it. I had no idea what I did. So always comment. All right. Some people were worried about file size and things like that. For what we're doing in this class, file size does not matter. Okay. If you were doing super embedded microprocessors the size of my pinky and, it only has 1 mega memory on it. Okay. Now we can start to worry about file size. I don't think your computer is going to have an issue with file size. Okay. You could write thousands of lines of code and it's not going to equal hardly anything. All right. When it goes to actually execute that code, all the comments actually get stripped out of the code. That's what the hashtag is for, is it strips everything out. All right. Anybody got any questions on comments? All right. Always comment your code as you go through there. So one thing I'll show you here is on this homework assignment is it's easy to copy and paste that in. And for each one of the requirements inside your homework assignment, just have that right above the part that actually executes that code. Then you know that you did all the pieces of the homework assignment. All right. So as we go through here, the first thing we're going to do is use the print function. So when you use functions inside Python, we're going to type something like print. Now, in the shell, I type something and I hit enter, right? Well, and it spits something back out to me, whether it was an error, the evaluation, whatever it was, I hit enter and it does it. When I do that, it reads that, it evaluates it, and it prints it, right? Does anybody remember that acronym? It reads it, evaluates, prints it. RIPL, right? Right. You were close. RIPL. All right. Inside a script, it doesn't matter. It's not going to print anything out to a user. So if I have 2 + 2 here, right, and I run this file, notice when I do to run this, how do I run it? I go up to run, I go to run module, or I can hit F5 on my keyboard. Either way, it doesn't matter how you do it. The first time you do this, it's going to say you have to save it before you can run it. So we hit OK. Does anybody remember from Tuesday what you need to do here? Never save it in this path. Okay. Create yourself a documents folder, save it somewhere in there. I'm going to create one in my downloads folder for the sake of it. And I'm going to call this my Python INF360, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. It's just a folder for you to store your code in. Okay. The file name does matter. All right. You always want to call it your name. So I'm Jason Zeller. Assignment, whatever. Assignment 1, assignment 2, assignment 3. You can use homework 1, homework 2, homework 3. That part doesn't matter, but you must call it that. I know it doesn't seem important, but again, when I download 80 of these, I can't have 80 assignment 1s, right? 1, I don't know which one was yours, and 2, if you forgot to put your name at the top of the paper, I really don't know what yours is, okay? So always put your name right in the file. If this is a midterm project, I type midterm project. That's simple, all right? Please put your name on your paper and your name in your URL. So we're going to call this assignment 1 because that's what we're going to work on, and we'll save it. Now, notice when I executed, nothing popped up over here. In my code, I have 2 + 2, but over here, nothing came up on the screen. And that's because I don't tell it to print anything out to the user. So if I actually ran this script inside of a terminal, right, which is normally how you would execute Python scripts, if I went out to my downloads folder, my Python, show it up here. Let's do the CD downloads. CD Python. Nope, there it goes. Not too far. There we go. And inside here, we can see that I have my Jason Zeller script. And if I do Python, Jason Zeller, I execute it, nothing happens, right? The reason is because we did not tell it to actually print the result of this. So to do that, we use what's called the print function. And if we put whatever we wanted inside of that print function, it will thus print it out. So if I go ahead and run this code, you'll see that it evaluated out and printed it on the screen. All right. If I was to run it from a terminal, you can see that 4 pops up on the screen. It's hard to see up here, but it does. All right. So anything you want to print out to the user, you will use the print function. And the print function is going to be your friend, right? The reason for that is you forgot what that variable is, or you made some changes to the variable. You have no idea what that variable is in the order of your program. You can always use print to figure out what it is at that point in the program. That make sense? All right. So to do print functions or to do functions in general, you're going to have some name and you're going to have parentheses, and then it's going to take some kind of input in and then a parenthesis on the backside. All right. If I start typing print, you'll see that idle will pop up. Okay, go ahead, make me a liar. Let's try it again because I already typed through. There we go. You can see that it's going to take in arguments. It's going to have some kind of separator value, an end value, all these other things in there. Don't worry about that stuff for now. Just know that on the print function, you tell it what you want to print and it will print it out. So if I say something like my name is equal to Jason as a string, and I tell it to print the name, it will go ahead and execute that and print out Jason at the bottom. Okay. So print function is going to be our friend. We're going to use that to interact with our people, right? You are the consumer of the script. You're going to use this to interact. So we're going to come up here and say something like print, hello, how are you, right? Of course, that's a question, not an exclamation, and it would print it out to the user. Now, if we want to get input from a user, we need to use the input function. So to use that, we have to say some kind of variable. We want to store whatever the user's typing in. So we're going to say something like name equals, and then we're going to say input, and we can have two parentheses there. But we may need something up here because why would we type in a name? It just says, how are you, right? So let's make sure we're grammatically correct here. Hello and welcome to my program. Then we can say print, what is your name? Okay. From down here, we want to store a variable. Now I could call it name. I could call it dog, cat, lizard. Doesn't matter what I call the variable name, but it's going to store whatever that user typed in. So it makes sense that if we're asking for a name, call it name. I know that seems simple, but some people will put like var1, var2, var3. Do you remember what var1, var2 is halfway through your program? No. All right. Use an appropriate name. So we're going to say name equals input, right? And then we want to print that back out to the user. So we're going to say print, you said your name is, right? And then we want to do string concatenation with whatever they typed in. So we're going to say name. So we have a greeting to the program. We're asking them a question. They're going to type something in. And then we're going to say, you said your name was, and then concatenate that to the end of the print. So if we execute this, we're going to see something like this. Hello and welcome to my program. What is your name? I can type in Jason, and it says your name is Jason. Now, everything we do in here is just like grammar or anything else in any other class, right? So yes, it printed out what I wanted it to there, but this isn't grammatically correct. So I will be grading because it's college, sorry. Spelling, grammar, punctuation, that kind of stuff. You should have that all nice and clean on your output. Meaning in order to get clean output here, we need some kind of punctuation, right? So we would say something like plus, and then we just put a period inside of there so that it concatenates that stuff together. Everybody see that? So now if I run this one, I'm going to get something like Jason, and you can see that it says, you said your name was Jason. Now, nothing is telling me that I have to type in my name, right? I said my name is that now, all right? So we're not sanitizing. In other words, we're not checking to make sure what the user typed in is what we asked for. At this point, we're just taking in input from the user. They can literally type anything they want. We'll get to sanitization down the road. All right. So for now, just assume whatever you ask for them to type in, they're actually going to type in. Okay. Now what we want to do is we got their name going through there and we told them what their name is. Let's try to gather their age. So if we say print, actually, I'm going to show you another one. So we're going to say age is equal to input. Only this time inside the input, I'm going to put the prompt here. So I'm going to say, what is your age? Okay. This is going to ask the question at the prompt. So what happens here is I type this in. This first one asks, what is my name? Notice that the blinking cursor goes to the line below it. I'm going to type in Jason. it asks what my age is. Notice that it's asking that question in line, right? If I type in, let's just assume 33, notice how that 33 is smashed right up against the question mark, right? The reason for that is because it takes this literally and then posts that question. So always give yourself a space. You may even want to throw in like a greater than symbol so that when they type in something, it makes your program look nice and clean like this. Okay, so now I can type in something, hit enter, and the program ends because we didn't tell it to print it out or do anything else. All right, how you ask these questions, if you want it to be ask the question, type it in, or if you want them to answer the question in line is entirely up to you. All right, except for the homework assignment, I asked specifically for you to do something. But how you guys interact with them in your programs, that's entirely up to you. All right. If you use the input or an inline, give them some kind of cool prompt, whether it's a greater than symbol, a hashtag prompt, a $sign, something, so that it makes it clean and easy for the user to know where they're supposed to type, right? Because when you run this code, they should not be clicking anywhere in here. The mouse is nothing to this program, right? You are just a text editor at this point. Does everybody understand what I'm talking about there? All right, now, if I had them type something in, we could say print, you said your age was, right? We can do this, we can say age, and we can put that in. Now, if we run this, we can see Jason, and we can see 33, and it comes back and says your name was age 33. So we'd obviously want to put a space here, right? We could put a space here, we could do plus, space, plus. That gets really ugly. I would just put the space at the end of the string that you were trying to type. Okay. Now, even though we typed in a number at the prompt, right? It asked for an age. We typed in 33. Anything that comes in from an input is always a string. Doesn't matter if they type a number, a letter, whatever, it is always going to be a string, which means if we were wanting to add, say, 32 to whatever age they typed in, we would say something like new age equals age plus 32. This is going to fail if I try to print new age. Do Jason, and I type 33. It's going to fail because we cannot concatenate strings and integers, right? So in order for this to work, we need to convert age to an integer. And to do that, we use the int function. So you just wrap it in an int, and that's going to convert it from whatever they typed in, whatever number, over to an integer so that we can do math with it. Then we can add 32 to it. We can add whatever we want to it as a number. New age is going to be an integer. So if I wanted to print new age, this part, it will work. So now if I do Jason and I do 33, it says my new age here is 65, right? We didn't actually put text in that. So if I say your age in 32 years is plus new age, and I try to run this. So Jason, 33. Well, now it failed on line what? Does anybody see what line it failed on? 21, right? Over here in this option, if you go to options, show line numbers, you can see your line number that it failed on. That way you're not having to sit there and count. Okay. You can also tell what line you're on down here in the lower right-hand corner. It's going to say line 22 because that's where my mouse cursor is. But if I click here, it's line 31. All right. So the reason that failed is because here we converted age to an integer. We added 32, which means new age is now an integer. Well, if we want to concatenate this string plus whatever new age is, we now need to convert new age over to a string. So we use str in order to convert that over to a string. And that's now inside our print statement. So if we run this, we get Jason, 33, and now it'll say your age in 32 years is 65. Everybody kind of see how that worked? All right, very basic, very easy way to get started there. Now, over here on the left-hand side, it's going to talk about comments. We already talked about that. We talked about the print function and how that works. We talked about the input function and storing that as a variable name. How you want to print that out, we already did that. If you want to calculate the length of whatever variable is, so we said my name earlier, right? We could say let's do a print here. The length of your name is, right? We'll do a concatenation, something like this, plus we can use the len function and then type in whatever variable we want to calculate the length of. And all it does is count the number of characters, right? So if I put that in there and I close my print statement, notice when I'm typing here, if I do this little one here, right? Watch the screen when I hit this button. Notice how that flashed gray? That closed that function, all right? If I do it again, it closes the whole print function. So always look for those. The colors of all this matters. Notice that anytime you use a function, it's purple, right? If you use a string, it's going to be green. If it's red up here, it's going to be a comment. And if it's a variable name, it's going to be black. So all these colors matter while you're working through here. If something doesn't look right, it's probably because you're missing something in between. All right. So as we go ahead and print this one, and so now we do JSON, we do 33. We're going to get an error here because the len of the name is actually an integer. And if I want to add it to the string or concatenate it to the string to print it out, then I need to convert this over to a string. So now we're taking the len of the name, whatever that result is, and then we're passing it into the string function so that it converts it to a string. All right. This can be a little tricky to do right off the bat when you guys are first start learning. So I recommend you break that out. What you can do up here is you can say something like name length equals the len of my name. And then here, all I have to do is convert that over to a string. So name length equals the string of name length, right? And then down here, all I have to do is put in the variable name length. And that will put it in there nice and clean for me. So if I do JSON, and I do 33, the length of my name is 5. Okay. This is one way to do it, where you break it out line by line on what you want to do step by step. Or once you get going, you can condense that all down to where it looks like something like this, real nice and clean. Just remember, it's going to do the most inner part first. So if we look at these parentheses, the inner part is going to be this name. It's then going to go to the len function to get converted to a number, the length. Then we're going to pass it into the string function so that it's converted to a string. Then it's added to the overall print statement that we're doing. Okay. Scroll down over here on the left-hand side. We talked about the string, the int. You also have the float function. This is if you want to convert an integer over to a float. Just know that it can be tricky converting from integers to floats depending on what you're doing. You can always convert an integer or in a float to a string. That's why string becomes the universal data type. All right. Let's see if there's anything necessary. Okay, so at the bottom of all your reading over here on the left-hand side, there's always going to be some practice questions. I encourage you to try to ask yourself what those are, right? This is like the little check at the end of a deal, whatever. You can get the answers to these if you go back to the main screen for this. So if I click on table of contents and I scroll down, appendix C is going to be the answer to all those questions. So take your little mini quiz and then you can check your answers as you want. I know it seems silly, but sometimes people need to redo that. Sometimes at the bottom of these sections, it's going to have practice projects. Those I encourage you to do. It's the only way you can test yourself as to what you're doing. Okay. Anybody have any questions over that material? All right, so that brings us to homework 1. So if we go back out here and we look at assignment 1, the best thing you can do is just copy and paste all of these requirements, right? See if I can blow that up a little bit so you can see it. You need to copy all of these requirements, just like this. We're going to Control C. We're going to go to the top of our program and paste them in. Okay. We just put a hashtag in front of each one of these so that they're a comment. Whoops. And now you can line up those pieces of those comments as to what's going on. So the first point is your initial comments. That is what's right here. Okay. So you immediately get 1 point just for putting that at the top of the paper. The next one says, use a print function. I'm going to go ahead and make this full screen so we can see it now. So use a print function to display a welcome and prompt a question to the user. Okay. Well, if we look at our code here, I do just that. What this means is I need to use the print function to do some kind of welcome to the user. And I want you to specifically prompt a question to the user using a print function. Okay. What you type in here, I don't care. Right. That's what this all of these instructions in here. Notice I'm not telling you what you have to do. Have fun with your project. In other words, it just needs to meet these requirements. That's it. So if you want to ask them what their age is, you want to ask them what grade they are, what's their grandmother's name, you can do whatever you want. Doesn't matter. Just meet these requirements. All I'm asking is that you say hello to them and you prompt some question to the user. Okay. This next one is you need to use the input function and store the results in a variable called myInput, right? Okay. Notice in my homework assignments, anything that is italicized, bold, underlined, I'm doing that for a reason, right? This means you're going to use this input function and you need to specifically call the variable myInput because I'm telling you it needs to be called myInput, which means instead of saying this one here where it's asking for a name, instead of calling it name equals input, I need to call it specifically myInput. Okay? Just because this has a requirement that I call it. Notice this is a capital I. So if I turn this in, this would not be right. It must be a capital I. In Python, everything is case sensitive, so I have to grade case sensitive, right? There's a difference between myInput with a capital I and myInput with a lowercase I. They're two totally different variables in Python. So you have to have them the exact same as what's in here. So in this case, we could take something like what I have here. MyInput equals input, and then it says use the print function to print the contents of myInput. Well, what does that mean? It means you literally do something like this, where you say you said your name was, and instead of name, we're going to use myInput. Okay. Now, you could be asking for a name here. You could be asking for an age. It doesn't matter. I just specifically want you to use the variable name myInput for this assignment on this first one. Yeah.
So on the where it says you said your name was, is that space between intentional? Will that add a space in your code?
It will. Yep. Yeah. If I leave this space, this hanging space at the end, that's so that whenever I type that in, it puts a space in front of it. Otherwise, I'd have to add a space and do that kind of stuff in between. There's going to be better ways of doing this in about 4 weeks, but for now, this is string concatenation to get that together. Okay. Great question. Okay. So as you can see, the way I'm organizing this file is it tells me what I need to do. I have the lines of code that solves this particular thing. Make sense? I have this one. I have the line of code. I have this one. I have the line of code. This next one is asking for you to use 2 different math operators from table 1.1 in your script. And they need to be used to manipulate the input from the user, right? So what does that mean? That means I do not want to see 2 plus 2 here because that doesn't do anything, right? 1, it's not printing it out to the user. And 2, it's not manipulating any input from the user, right? So what that means is now you kind of get to go off script and go, all right, let's do print, what is your age, right? And then we're going to store that from the user. So we'll call it my age and we'll get the input from the user. And you may want to like just do something like this greater than symbol so that the user knows where they're typing something in. That's always beneficial for that. And we're going to store this my age. Now we have to figure out what we're going to do with that age, right? So we could say something like print your age, or tell you what, let's back up. Let's do this. So we get the age from the person. We're going to say in 10 years, right? Equals my age plus 10, right? It's going to take whatever they typed in and add 10. Remember that we have to convert this over to an integer in order to do math against it. And then we can just print to the user, your age in 10 years is plus, and then we're going to take the string of in 10 years. Whoops, years, like that. Okay. Then we might want to do another math operation. We could say 20 years ago equals my age minus 20. And then you come over here and you got to convert this to an integer, remember? And so now that is my age minus 20. And we just have another print statement that does the same thing. When we say your age 20 years ago was, and then we change this variable here to 20 years ago. All right, take this out here. So this will solve this. We're saying, what is your age? We just get in an age from the user. We decide to add 10 years to it, and that's what we're going to print out. Then we say, what is your age 20 years ago? So we do -10 to whatever they typed in. Notice that in 10 years does not affect my age. So me adding 10 does not add 10 to my years or my age. That becomes a new variable called in 10 years. Does everybody see how I did that? I'm not changing what they typed in. I'm just creating a new variable, taking what they typed in, adding something, and that becomes it. Do you have a question? No, that's all right. Please, you're not the only one out of 80 that's going to be confused right now. All right, so and I'll show you how this all works as we go down here. So let me get rid of this extra stuff at the bottom. All right, if we go line by line with the code, we're going to have print the question to the user, or print a welcome. We're going to print a question to the user. We're going to gather an input from the user, and I specifically want you to use the variable called my input. All right. So we're going to be gathering a name, but we need to specifically call it my input. Then we have to print that back to the user. So we say, you said your name is whatever it was. String concatenate those together so we get a nice output. Then we're going to need to do something with the math operators. Remember, math operators is anything from table 1.1. So if we go back to table 1.1, it is anything out of this table. So you can do plus, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, exponents, integers, whatever you want to do, doesn't matter, right? So what we need to do is come up with some other question so that we can do something with numbers. So I'm going to go with asking them their age. It's the easiest thing to play with, right? So we ask them, what is your age? And we gather that input from the user to say, my age, that's the variable I'm storing, is to whatever they typed in. All right. The next step, and we can even put this in, right? Comments are friends. So we could say them here and say, add 10 to my age. That is this line here. So we're going to take my age. Remember, anything they type in from an input is a string. We have to convert that to an integer so that we can do math on it. Yes.
So you have to make sure that so for it to pick up that you're trying to add math, you have to do integer.
Right, right. Because my age right now, when they type something in up here, it's always going to be a string, always. All right. Even if they type in numbers and numbers only, it's always going to be a string. So we have to convert that over to an integer so that we can do math with it. Then we can add 10 to it because that's just the random number I picked. And we need to set that to some variable name. Now, in 10 years is probably not the best variable name, but it's something, right? At least we know what that represents because it's meaningful in some way. Then we're going to print that out to the user. So print result to the user. Then we decided to subtract 20 from my age. Okay. So we do that here, and that looks good. I don't know why it put me over there. I'm missing a parenthesis somewhere here. There we go. And then at the end, we're going to print result to the user. Okay. So if we run this code, so far our program's going to look something like this. Got to close a quote. Did everybody see that error that I got? it says your parenthesis was never closed. So if I look at this, notice how it highlighted this one over here. That's because I don't have one on the end. I need to have one. This is for the parenthesis of the string that we did, but I don't have a second one at the end to close that. So if I put one at the end here, that will fix that issue. Again, notice that it flashes gray when I do that. That signifies I closed it. So now I can run my code. All right. We have a hello and welcome. What's your name? I type in a name. It says, great, your name. You said your name was Jason. What is your age? I type in 33, hit enter, and we're going to see our two print statements immediately pop up. Your age in 10 years is 43. Your age 20 years ago was 13. Now, the only thing I'm missing here is what? The punctuation. Yep, you're right. So what we need to do is add punctuation at the end of these lines, which is as simple as coming in here and saying plus, period, and then putting a little quote in there, and plus, period, there, so that when it prints it out to the user, it's actually making full sentences. So Jason, what is your age? 33. And now we can get the full sentence to come out. Everybody see what this looks like? So if you followed along, you're done with your first homework assignment. This is all the requirements you need to have for it. Now, I encourage you to do something a little bit different than what I did. Instead of doing adding 10 and subtracting 20, maybe multiply it by 10 or 20. Or instead of their age, do something else. All right. You really, and I know it sounds silly, but you really want to have fun with those homework assignments. Come up with something completely off the wall. And the reason I say that is the more you do, like you can do way more than this, right? This is the absolute bare minimum for this assignment. If you do a whole lot more, then your next homework assignment is going to be a whole lot easier because you had practice using this stuff. If you copy and paste what I did here today, it's not going to help you once you get to your midterm assignment. So go through, practice this, create a couple different scripts, figure out what you like, but always test it before you turn it in. All right. Does anybody have any questions on what we've done? Anybody online? By the way, those of you online, if you guys ever have questions in the middle of class, by all means, come off mute, ask questions, pop in the chat, whatever you want. You guys are no different than the people in the classroom.
I think everything was pretty clear. Thank you.
Okay. What's up? Okay, so yeah, good question. So the last 2 points here was to use string concatenation. You could do something here, but guess what this was? String concatenation, right? This one was string concatenation. This one is string concatenation. So you automatically get these 2 points by doing these lines up above because you're using string concatenation.
To do string in 10 years is because you have a variable in 10 years and age.
Yes. So that's a great question. So here you can see that I did the calculation up above and then I put this in the line, right? But I don't have to do this calculation up above. I can just take this right here, copy it and replace it right into this here. And it's the same thing. And then I don't need this here. That's kind of a shortcut hand, but notice how it's one thing inside of another, inside of another. You can absolutely do that, but the other way is just to keep it fresh, you know, to start kind of thing. Ultimately, your goal when we get in later on is going to be to clean up your code, right? So we don't need those extra lines. We can condense that down. But don't think you always have to condense everything down. This is still a beginning Python class. If you need to let it spread out a little bit or you do it every now and then, code is code. And everybody will turn in something different. Like, that's fine.
I have a question.
What's up?
I have a question. So, is there any way to start a new line of code by using some shortcut?
A new line of code?
Yes, for example, in C++, you can use NDL, and within the same statement, you can start a new line of code when you output.
Oh, yeah. So don't do 2 lines of code on the same line.
Okay.
Yep. Is there a way to do it? Technically, yes, but don't do it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And the reason for that is you want to keep this kind of clean as it goes down through here, because troubleshooting later on is a nightmare. C++ can kind of do that, yes, but as you know, when you execute C++, it doesn't give you any errors as to what, where, and why it's broke. Your editor will, your IDE will, but the actual, like, it won't tell you there was an error on line 121 or something like that. Does anybody have any questions on how homework assignments work? How this first homework assignment works?
So the question I have is up above, and it asks for like, what is your age? Why did you do the $sign?
Where did I do the $sign? Oh, in that first one I did. So the only reason I use this greater than sign here is to give a nice clean prompt to the user. So if we look down here and I have Jason, notice that when I asked age, that's much better than where I typed in Jason.
Yeah.
Right? Because here I don't know where my cursor is. It doesn't give me a visual to let the learner know, hey, type something here kind of thing. So I would want to fix this input up here to maybe have something like the greater than sign. So a $sign, hashtag greater than, doesn't matter what you use, just make it clean for your user so that there's no mistakes. Like right now, it doesn't mean much, but when you get to your midterm project, you want to make sure the user's typing in what you expect them to type in. And the cleaner you write your code in the real world, the less questions you get coming back for people going, oh, I typed it in. No, you didn't. All right. So it's just a habit that I try to get people to do early on.
As how fast is your turnaround time of uploading these videos to YouTube?
So the upload on the videos, I try to have them done every night. So because I got back-to-back classes, I can't immediately upload it.
Yeah.
If it saves and it's done before we're done with class, then I'll push it up before my next class.
Okay.
But if it's not, then I'll do it the other way around. So you can always expect it by the next morning. Like I'll try to have it in the evenings, but you can always expect it the next morning. And like this, most of the time we'll do this kind of stuff early on Tuesdays, right? And Thursdays we'll get to where we're starting to work on whatever the homework is or something. So you should have the video no later than Wednesday, and you should be able to continue to work for the rest of the week. And remember, if you guys need an extension on a homework assignment, something like that, just email me. Don't make it a habit, but email me and I'll usually look over it. It's fine. But if you fall too far behind, it's on you. I'm not going to be coming after you every week like you got to turn in homework assignment 1. No, I ain't doing that. Right? You're all adults now. Whether you like it or not, I'm going to treat you like adults. Anybody else got any questions?
The
Alright.
length thing,
Yeah.
the current length of your day, that's required for this assignment, right?
No.
Oh, okay.
Nope. If you go back to the requirements, there was no reason to use Lin. You can, that way you can get practice with it because you'll need it later on, but it's not required. Again, what I showed you here on this screen right here is the absolute bare minimum. You can do a whole lot more than this if you want to. And I encourage you again to have a little fun with it. Like I can tell you right now, if I do 80 of these same ones and I have to read it over and over, I'm going to get, cross-eyed doing it. If you make it fun and make funny things go in there, I'm totally okay with that. I have to put a caveat out there. Please don't make them inappropriate. Okay. I had one student that insisted on doing inappropriate ones in there. And unfortunately, it got so bad that I had to turn it in. Like it just got bad. I'm a pretty easygoing guy, but that was getting pretty belligerent. So have fun with it. I mean, whatever your favorite hobby is, throw something in there. I don't care. Hey, wizard, what's your name? I don't know. Let's go. Cool. I'll do this one, right? Yeah.
So we literally can ask literally anything.
Anything you want. That's what I'm saying. Like you don't have to do name and age in this. You can ask anything you want. I don't care as long as it meets this rubric, right? You just have to make sure the first one that you call and get an input for has the variable name my input. After that, whatever you want to do with those math operators, you don't have to ask for an age. You can go calculate the sum of pi and run it out on the screen. I don't care what you do. That's what I mean is have fun with the homework assignments. They're yours. I don't restrict what you do. You can make one homework assignment build to the next homework assignment if you want. Cool. It's actually
Is there any way
practice.
to get extra points on the projects?
No, I don't have any extra credit on any of the assignments anymore. Back in the day I did, I do not anymore. You shouldn't need it. I'll be honest, you shouldn't need it.
Okay.
There again, you doing extra in the assignments is just going to make it that much easier for you when you come to the midterm project or the final project, because you're going to have enough coding, you're going to feel comfortable with it, especially if you're coming from another language, it doesn't really matter. But for those of you that are brand new to this kind of thing, like, just do it. That's the only way you're going to learn Python, is just flat out writing scripts. Write them for your brother, your sister, your roommate, your mom, your dad, wherever you're at, write them for them and make them run through the program. Because they're going to plug in stuff you don't want them to plug in, and they're going to break your program. You're going, okay, I should probably do that better. So I tell that everybody every semester is, you know, if you got kids, obviously most of you coming in here probably don't have kids, but the online students and stuff, like, run your kids through it, or run your roommate through it, or somebody like that, run your classmate through it while you're sitting in class and see if they can get it to break. Now, obviously right now, again, we're not sanitizing any input. You can ask for a name and I'm going to type in 33, right? It doesn't matter in this case until later on when I say, okay, now you have the tools to sanitize. From that point on, you have to. But that's weeks down the road yet. All right. Yeah.
So can we just turn this one now? Later?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can. Just know that if you once you turn it in, it's really hard for me to go clear the attempt if you wanted to turn in something new later on. But you're more than welcome to turn in, like, if you got a copy of what this is right now, throw it up on Blackboard. Remember, on the homework assignments, you do not have to zip those, right? This is just one file. So you just go out here to Blackboard, you click on assignment 1, come down here, like, blow this up so it's actually, you can see it. I got it so zoomed in for the classroom here. All right, upload file, browse file, grab your .py file and hit submit. That's all you got to do every time. Now, when you get to your midterm project or even your final project, if for some reason you have more than one file, then zip those two together and upload that. Don't upload multiple files in Blackboard. It's kind of a pain for me to pull all those down. It's easier just for you to zip it and then send them up. But I ask on these early homework assignments where it's just one file, please don't zip it. It's like, it sounds like it's not that big a deal, right? You right click, unzip, do that 80 times. And that adds an extra 20 minutes of grading on that for just right clicking to unzip files. So please do it only if you have multiple files. All great questions.
Do you typically go through the readings on Tuesday?
I will always do live coding and everything both days, right?
Okay.
But the homework, usually we will start on Thursdays, more than likely. Because you'll want to get through the material before you get to the homework, right? So.
And the homework's always due the Sunday after.
Homeworks are always due on Sunday of the week it was assigned. Yep. Sunday at midnight. And again, if you're going to be late, all you have to do is email me. Okay. So if you, for whatever reason, can't get it done until Monday, Tuesday, email me and submit it. Sorry, what was that?
Can I resubmit my homework again?
I would prefer that you didn't have to resubmit it multiple times. It's not that you can't do it. It's that I have to go in and clear your old attempt and add a new attempt. So if that happens and you submit the wrong assignment, just email me and I will go back in and try to clear your attempt. Just know that it may take a day or two or however quickly I get through that email. I'm usually pretty attentive on my email, but there again, I have three or four sections of this class is 80 students, and I still have 3 other classes that I teach, right? I teach about 100 and some odd students this fall. So I'm attentive, just give me some respect on the time going through there. Just know I will always err in the fault of the student. Always. I always do. So if it's you're late because I didn't get it cleared or something like that, then it's not your fault. All right. I'm not the guy that's going to go, nope, I said midnight and that's it. I don't do that. Life happens. All great questions this semester. I love it. It's going to be a good video for the new guys. Anybody else? All right. I'm going to stop the recording.